Lunacy in the New York civil trial brought by Leticia James. We're back in with Donald Trump's case in chief, and he brought two experts onto the stand today. We'll check in at the X script thread. We'll hear from Steve Witkoff, a real estate executive and a Trump friend who testified today, along with this guy, Jason Flemmons, an accountant, and we'll check in on the X script with our friend Klasfeld Reports over on the X platform. But we pick up from yesterday in the New York civil trial because Don Jr. had finished testifying, and right after trial ended, he came out and gave a quick stinger for the media. But this comes in the aftermath of Leticia's statement about Don Jr. And of course, Donald Trump's case is now going, and he is bringing his witnesses. Don Jr. had already testified previously when Leticia called him, and then after she was done with her case, Trump is now going, and Don Jr. was first up for the defense. So we'll check in with what Tish says, then we'll hear from Don, then we'll jump into the day's activities and get up to speed. Here is Leticia, aka Tish James, New York Attorney General, getting us up to speed on her government case.
Today marked the start of the 7th week of our trial against Donald Trump, the Trump Organization, and other defendants, and the first day of their attempt to defend their family fraud. The first witness was Donald Trump Jr., who took the stand to talk about his dad's business. But rather than respond to any legal claim against him and his family, or address the substantial evidence against them, Donald Trump Jr. spent his entire time on the stand talking through pictures of Trump properties.
Are you mad or what?
In his sales pitch,
You sound mad.
Donald Trump Jr. described his father as a real estate artist.
Well?
He described Trump golf courses as crown jewels.
They are great golf
He showed us
courses.
pictures of apartment building lobbies. He called Mar-a-Lago an American castle. And he even said that no one was putting gyms in apartment buildings before his father did.
Well, he changed it, a lot of
And
that. I mean,
after
the whole
spending a
skyline's
full day
different.
walking through a marketing presentation to sell us all on the greatness of the Trump Organization, the defendant still did not make a single point to refute the case we brought against them.
What is your point?
This is a courtroom, not a boardroom. The Trumps can try to impress and distract with glossy pictures of golf courses and glowing descriptions of condominium towers.
It's about valuation.
But we all know the
Hello?
facts of this case.
Valuation.
And the facts don't lie.
Oh my gosh, the facts don't lie. All right, my friends, that's what they're doing over there. That's governing person. Amazing. It's about valuation, okay? They were showing you the value of all the properties and how they would communicate to these other banks in order to get loans and get deals and what they would build and why it was worth what they said it was worth. So, all right, that's Tish. She doesn't do much other than sits there and reads in front of a teleprompter, which is, kind of embarrassing even for her. But this is what Don Jr. said after the day of testimony, and then we'll get up to speed on what happened with the latest experts.
Go, go.
Listen, sort of a boring cross-exam. I thought they were going to go somewhere, but I think they understand that they have nothing as it relates to a case other than, I guess, an overzealous attorney general who would destroy all of New York business by going after transactions where there are no victims, I guess, other than herself. But you guys have got to think about the precedent that this case sets. If an attorney general can, years later, after all parties of transactions are paid back in full, with interest, making hundreds of millions of dollars, where they have no complaint, where they said they wouldn't have done anything differently, where every witness, as it relates to my brother and I, every witness that the Attorney General has called have said that my brother and I were not involved in the statement of financial condition. That even includes their star witness, the perjurer-in-chief, Michael Cohen, who's perjured himself probably more times than any human being I can think of. Even he said, perhaps the one time he was actually telling the truth in all of this, that my brother and I had nothing to do with it, but it doesn't matter because it's a witch hunt. It always has been. But the precedent that it sets for New York business, if you don't perhaps donate to Leticia James' re-election campaign, I too will go after your billion-dollar transactions. It's ripe for extortion and corruption, but, that's what you get from the Democrat Party in New York these days, it seems. So it's a scary precedent. I don't know how anyone could do business in the city with that. Anyone you speak to who's actually in banking, who's actually in real estate, understands that. But again, they don't want to put themselves in the crosshairs, so perhaps they'll be silent. So it's a disgrace that this is happening right now, but I think we'll make our points, we'll make our case, and we'll go on from there. So you guys have a great day.
All right, so that's Don Jr. with a short statement after the trial testimony, and that was Donald Trump's day one case in chief. Now we're jumping into day two, and we got some additional witnesses who were there called in today. This guy, Steve Witkoff, we put a face to a name, a real estate executive, and a Donald Trump friend, and this guy also came in the afternoon, Jason Flemmons, an accountant, forensic accountant, somebody who knows accounting. So we're going to check in with the day's events. Adam Klasfeld is reporting. He's a great follow for legal coverage, and you can follow follow him at Classfeld Reports. He's reporting for The Messenger. And we get started with the defense. Now, he says, good morning from New York. The first witness up today is Steve Witkoff, one of the 4 experts that AG Tisch tried to preclude. Now, they start off, they say, Your Honor, the defense calls Mr. Witkoff to testify. Steve here. Steve stands up. Steve, you promise to tell the truth, done to God? He says, yes, I do. Okay, Steve, tell us about, where are you from? Born and raised, maybe New York, I don't know. Tell me about your career. Well, I've done a lot in real estate, built a lot of buildings, a lot of projects. I came to know Trump through some of our projects. We've been friends for, I don't know, a couple decades, long time. Okay, so you've done a lot of work with real estate? Yeah, a lot. Can you tell us how much? A lot. Okay, Your Honor, you see, he's an expert in real estate. We move to qualify him as an expert. So we move to qualify Steve. Government says, objection, Your Honor. First of all, I think we should only limit his expertise to what we'll call real estate development, okay? Very, very limited. Says there's no such expertise as real estate developer valuations, and so we don't want to make him an expert on valuations. We're going to make him an expert on development. Like he can build the buildings, but he can't evaluate and value the buildings, they say. Trump's defense says, what the heck are you talking about? Chris Key stands up. He says, appraisal isn't only under the purview of appraisers, okay? A lot of people can evaluate and value a building. Now, Engoron says, well, I'm going to agree with the government on this one. Chris, you're wrong. They're right, as per usual. And so, Mr. Witkoff, you are an expert in real estate development, okay? You can tell us how the buildings are made, but you can't tell us how much they cost. All right. So Witkoff says, okay, whatever. So he says, tell me, Mr. Witkoff, how did you come to know Donald Trump, former president? Oh my gosh, wow. A long time ago, I was hungry having lunch one day, and I met Trump at a delicatessen more than 2 decades ago. I'll never forget it. Turkey Club, great sandwich. And he's been a really good friend since then. And he says, particularly after the death of my son. And so shout out to the Witkoff family and rest in peace to your son. And shout out to Donald Trump for being a good friend. And they say, Mr. Witkoff, are you being paid for your testimony here today? He says, no, I'm not. The expert witnesses usually get paid. He says, no, I'm not getting paid for this. He says, well, I want to ask you about how you would do deals. What was your strategy for doing business deals? Witkoff says, well, the way I look at things, I would look at multiple deals. A lot of stuff would come in and I would pick projects. I would think that the best deals are the deals that have multiple exit strategies. I'd like to be able to get out of them. And if I had multiple options, that made me feel good. Your Honor, I move to admit this document or this testimony. And the government objects. They say, no, Your Honor, objection to that. That's probably a valuation. And we're talking about development. He can't testify about that, blah, blah, blah. So Trump's lawyer, Christopher Keese, he says, Your Honor, this is ridiculous. All right, it goes to the question of materiality at issue in the remaining counts at issue in this trial. There's a lot going on here and we need to get to the bottom of it. He says, everyone in this trial, Trump's lawyer, is running around saying fraud, fraud, fraud. This is fraud. That's fraud. There's fraud, fraud, fraud. Every return is fraud from you people. Nonstop. No. He says that has not even been decided yet. Stop saying fraud. There is no fraud. And I'm tired of hearing fraud come out of your fraud mouths. And the judge is like, wait a minute, man. Wait a minute. And Keese says, no, let me finish. Fraud everywhere and I'm sick of it. And Keese goes on. He says, and the fraud also complies with the materiality and that hasn't even been established yet either. And so I'm tired of hearing about it. And the judge is like, hey, finally gets control of the situation. And of course, Engoron, he says, stop it a minute. He says, I'm sustaining the government's objection to some of the testimony at issue here. Now, the witness was excused while all this was going on. And Christopher Keese, he says, you're going to give them this standard? He says, the government's standard is lunacy, Judge. It's lunacy. I can't believe that you even ruled the way that you did. And of course, before this trial started, Engoron had found that they've already were liable for fraud. Okay, he just issued a ruling on that. He said, having prevailed, Tishy wins, there is fraud, they're liable, and this really is about damages. And so Keese is saying, stop saying that. Nobody's been finding fraud here. They keep arguing. And then the government chimes up, Andrew stands up, and he says, Your Honor, can we please not have never-ending motions for reconsideration? In other words, the judge will make a ruling, and Keese is putting up a fit, right? He's like, oh, this is lunacy and blah, blah, blah. And so they say, Judge, can you just tell him to shut up? Like, he keeps asking you to reconsider, but you've already ruled. Just tell him to sit down. The judge says, you're right. So Mr. Witkoff, expert who's still on the stand, you're barred from offering an opinion about the Doral. He says, I think that's not relevant to this case, and I don't think we need to hear about it. Even though Tishy, talked all about Doral. So he says, you can't offer an opinion about Doral. And so the lawyer now comes back and he says, okay, well, look, Mr. Witkoff, I want to ask you a separate question about a golf course that's going on. Government objection. Nope, we're not talking about golf courses here. And Engoron says, you guys keep objecting to all of this testimony, but here's what I want to ask. I want to know from you. Do you want to risk reversal here if I don't let in the question? Like, what if I don't let in this question and this comes back down because the Court of Appeals reverses it? You want to risk that, government? And the government says, actually, no, I have no concerns about that, actually. And the court has to draw clear lines about his broad discretion to bar irrelevant expert testimony. He's like, no, I don't care. This is New York. What are they? You think they're going to reverse you and like exonerate Trump? No. So Engoron says, okay, fine, I'll sustain the objection then. So there you go. So he grants the government. No, you're not worried about this coming back down on appeal? All right, fine. Objection sustained. You guys win. So Witkoff testimony continues. They say, all right, government is sitting there like totally victorious, and Trump's defense continues on. Mr. Witkoff, I want to move on to 40 Wall Street. Can I ask about this? And they say, yeah, you can ask about that. Okay, great. Before we get to it, they take a break. And we're back. Engoron brings the witness back, and he says, you know, Mr. Witkoff, while we're here, have you ever been qualified as an expert before? And if so, what and where? And Witkoff says, no, I don't think so. I don't think I've ever been qualified as an expert. My mother might think I'm one. Shout out to the moms in the house. Man, we love our moms out there. The judge smiles and there's laughter in the courtroom. Shout out to the moms. Yeah, moms think we're experts. You know, we love our mamas. So no further questions. Okay, they come back. They have a quick break. 40 Wall Street asks probably about some valuations of 40 Wall Street. This guy opines about it, and then cross-examination begins. Okay, no further questions, Your Honor, says Trump's defense, and they wrap it up. Government begins. Tishy's government, Andrew, jumps up and he says, good morning, Mr. Witkoff. I want to welcome your debut as an expert witness in court. Probably pretty exciting for you. He says, you may want to rethink your no compensation agreement, though. They start laughing in the courtroom. Now, I want to go back to 40 Wall Street, says the government. Mr. Witkoff, were you aware of whether there was any restrictions on the ability to convert the property to condominiums? Any restrictions that you were aware of? No. I want to show you this document about 40 Wall Street with the following clause. Put it up on the screen. He says, paragraph 4 eliminates the tenant's condominium conversion rights, which it had under section 2709. You familiar with this? Witkoff, he says, well, I had cited the property's ability to be converted to condominiums in its value. He says, that's why I did that this way. And this clause is also in the modification to the ground lease on 40 Wall Street. So this is modifying the 40 Wall Street property lease. It says, in consideration of the elimination of section 2709 of the lease, landlord and tenant of the lease, landlord and tenant agree that if in the future, tenant is of the opinion that the area and times favor the construction of residential units, which may be condominium units, and the tenant desires to create a residential condominium for sale of units to the public, tenant may propose revision to the lease to permit the conversion to condominium ownership for the sale of residential units, provided that in no event shall the landlord have any obligation to agree with or take action to effectuate the condominium conversions. Landlord has sole discretion. They say, do you remember that? He says, yeah, I see it. So the government continues. They say, Mr. Witkoff, how is the valuation of 40 Wall Street? Can you tell us about, it says that it's valued based on a cap rate and cash flow rather than its potential value as a condominium. So you see how the valuation was based on separate things, not that. You see that? Witkoff says, yeah, I see that. No further questions, Your Honor. Adam Klasfeld gives us a brief recap. He says that his testimony about the value of the condominium was contradicted by some documentary evidence. So they're just trying to, and Witkoff's proposed testimony was barred as irrelevant. All right, yeah. So not a real thrilling witness in either way. But next up, defense is continuing their case. They say, Your Honor, next up, the defense calls Jason Flemmons. Jason Flemmons comes up there. Mr. Flemmons, you promise to tell the truth, told you the truth. God, I do. Perfect. Mr. Flemmons, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you do? He says, yeah, I am a forensic accountant and I am the senior managing director at Ancora, which happens to be an accounting firm. And this is Jason Flemmons and what he does. And you can see here, it says he's the senior managing director at the place. This is what he looks like. Over 25 years of experience in forensic accounting, corporate investigations, technical accounting, auditing matters. Provides a broad range of expert and consulting services around accounting advisory, fraud examination, and so on. And he's done a lot of work, right? So that's this guy. Now, we continue on. He's testifying about his career, and he's got a lot. The judge says, well, before I can qualify you as an expert witness who can opine about some of this stuff, we got to talk about this, right? And so he does. Now he says, you're qualified as an expert. Okay, thanks for all that background. You are an expert. It sounds like you're very good. So they say, Mr. Flemmons, can you tell us about the difference between estimated current value and fair value? And he gives this long explanation. He's like, yeah, you know, this is this way and this is this way. It's very complicated. I'm very smart, but here's how we do evaluations. Great. No, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. And testimony continues. Flemmons, he says that the language below from Trump's financial statement is, quote, the highest level of warnings. Now, Trump has has this to say. Trump has described as worthless clauses. All right, so this is what Flemmons is saying. This is a statement from a certified public accountant, Weissmann LLP. They say, because the significance and the pervasiveness of the matters above make it difficult to assess their impact on the statement of financial condition, users of this financial statement should recognize that they might reach different conclusions about the financial condition of Donald J. Trump if they had access to a revised statement of financial condition without the above reference exceptions to the accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. In other words, you might have a different interpretation of this. They say to Flemmons, you see that? He says, yeah, what does that mean to you? He says, that's the highest level of warning. And can you explain? He says, well, financial statements, and this is the Trump witness, right? He says, Flemmons testifies that financial statements are permitted to have disclosed departures from GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles. So Tish is saying Trump didn't do things according to the generally accepted accounting principles. Trump deviated from that, and that was fraud. And Trump is saying, no, I didn't. It's not fraudulent. Yes, we made different valuations, different from GAAP, but it was not fraudulent because we disclosed it and we disclaimed it. They knew about it and we were clear about it. The defense displays a chart about the grades of accountant assurance in the reliability of reports. They say, okay, so you said, Mr. Flemmons, that this was the highest level of warning. So there must be other levels. Is that true? Yeah. Can you walk us through them? He says, sure. Puts a chart up on the screen. It looks like there's different bars, low, medium, high, whatever. He says, can you tell us about how, forensic accountants talk about these things? He says, I'd be happy to. He says, the lowest confidence level would be from an adverse compilation, and the highest would be from an unqualified audit. And so Trump's financial statements were compilations with warnings. That's how he assembled them. So he says Trump's statements are at the bottom left corner, showing that they're low confidence. The testimony is offered. Now he says, right, it is low confidence. And we know this, this is what accountants do. We, say this is really, really high confident. We know that this is legitimate and it can be verified. It's got good backing. We trust it. This one's not. But just because it's low confidence doesn't mean that it is fraudulent. They say the recipients who got the report, they weren't misled. They knew about it. In fact, there's a whole paragraph that says so. He says, and he continues, he explains it, right? They're not misled. There's all these different layers. This is exactly how it works. And they're done. They say, perfect. Thank you for that great explanation. So Trump didn't commit any fraud? No, of course. He disclosed all of the departures from the generally accepted accounting principles, let them know they knew all about it. They signed off on it. They had the opportunity to do their due diligence and so on. Great. Thank you, Mr. Flemmons. No further questions. Now his testimony is done for the day and the direct examination is expected to continue in the morning. So they will be back tomorrow with this guy. And then there'll be cross-examination for the government as well. Engoron, he says, the judge, as Flemmons is leaving, he says, Mr. Flemmons, do you spell your name different from Mark Twain, whose original name or, not pen name is called Samuel Clemens? Is Flemmons like Clemens? He says, no, Judge, it's not. Stop asking me weird questions. So it looks like they are wrapping up earlier than in the day. And of course, we're grateful to Klasfeld for reporting this at Klasfeld Reports. Be sure you give him a follow. Of course, very likely he'll be there tomorrow. We'll be there to cover and try to assemble and unpack what is happening in the courtroom. But Trump is presenting his case in chief. We heard from these two experts, and Jason Flemmons will continue on. But we'll wrap it up with a Weissmann clip because, man, he's very upset that this is going on and that Trump is continuing to critique the judicial process, saying he's attacking the system, which of course is the whole point. Here is Weissmann.
The impact of putting this out there and running on this message.
Well, I think it is part and parcel of attacking the rule of law because it is attacking the judicial system. He is having his day in court. That's the way it works. He is
by an elected prosecutor called Tish, and Judge Engoron, also elected,
has an opportunity in court to convince the judge why he is right. Starting Monday, he will be calling witnesses.
That's what we're doing
in his
right
case,
now.
As is his right, and his co-defendants. And that's the way the system works, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case. When you don't like the outcome, especially as somebody who is in the government, attacking the umpire is not a way that you instill confidence in the system. But I think his entire goal is to delegitimize the system, to delegitimize people in law enforcement, to delegitimize journalists like you and Carol.
Yeah.
It's to have no checks and balances. These are really the tools of an autocrat. And
it's weird. The only tool, literally the only tool Trump has is his speech. That's all. All he's doing is just talking about what they're doing to him, and it's causing them to panic, right? They control the executive branch. They control the DOJ. They control all the levers of power, and they're still freaked out because Trump is just saying that it's illegitimate. And my friends, if it was actually legitimate, there would be no concerns about this, okay? Think about it when you see a clear and dry case, okay? Somebody clearly DUI, somebody clearly, manslaughter or murder. Like, it's not contested. Nobody challenges the legitimacy of those prosecutions. They're challenging these prosecutions because they are illegitimate. Trump speaking out about it just magnifies it, shines the spotlight down upon it, and they're pretending that it is all still legitimate when most Americans, I think, are realizing it is not. And for guys like Weissmann and all the other hysterics on MSNBC and elsewhere, would they be sitting here with that same vibe if Trump were in charge? If this was a Republican prosecutor and a Republican judge under a Republican administration? No, of course not. They'd be crying from the rooftops that it was tyrannical, because it is. And they're the ones that are doing it. So my friends, we'll continue to cover. I'll look forward to seeing you as you join us on the next one. Thank you for subscribing, and really thank you for sharing this with a friend or family member. We go live every day at this time. We're covering all of the Trump cases. We would love it if you joined us, because there's going to be a lot more to unpack. Florida, New York, Georgia, January 6th, Colorado ballot removal, and more. Thank you for joining us as we cover it, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.